Hello. Hello. Hmm. Happy holidays.
Hello, hello.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. We hope you're all well enough or well.
And warm. Oh,
Jesse
this
mentions warm for a reason.
this is very unwarm where I am. Mm.
Mm. Ha 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 ha.
Mm. Good to see everyone.
Do you want to see everyone here? Please check the other pages, please. Mm. Oh. Well, we're going to continue today with beginning the sitting with some Brahma practice. And of course, the intention is to help us deepen our connection with our heart center, chitta itself. So if you want to put your hand there, just if you feel disconnected or if you just appreciate that you can actually physically touch the chitta heart mind and receive the connection with yourself there. So we call it finding the heart. Often when we call up any kindness, care, or relating to ourselves with tenderness, it's not like snapping our fingers. It often requires a kind of not trying too hard, not giving up. Sometimes, if we say a phrase to ourselves, that the emphasis is on the meaning of the words, like may I be happy and peaceful of heart. It's like really attempting to mean it. And sometimes the hand there on our heart, it's like it allows us to receive receive that meaning directly, feeling the kindness in the words, the care. This time of year is all about finding peace in our heart and kindness. So this can be a very quiet, not intense glimmer of just dropping into a tenderness there. And you call it up and see what happens. Sometimes it's just a whisper of a word like care. I care about myself. May I experience ease of well-being while living on our earth. Taking a few deep breaths as we receive that wish. Sometimes it can feel like you're trying to find a radio station. You haven't quite found it. It's like you hear that static and then there's a pause and you hear the station. You drop into this awareness field of kindness. And often as we can start to shift to the awareness of breathing, you can notice if there's some kindness present in this awareness field at our abdomen area. So there can be a sense of receiving kindness as the movement begins and rises. Kindness, care, tenderness as the movement falls and disappears. Sometimes helps to have our hand there to help us receive that. This movement that we are utterly dependent on. and don't often care about. The breath is putting on quite a show for us, really. Shift to our awareness of hearing, like we're coming into a deeper stillness of mind, heart, through our awareness of hearing. This stillness is healing. So rather than being lost in thinking, there's just a coming, returning back to receiving vibration and texture, not through that thought process that we're so good at. Just receiving. It can be the texture of silence. Any sound. You can pick up the radio station, the frequency. You pick it up. You see if you can be with it as it takes birth, lives, and dies. Process. There's no me, no bird, no silence, just texture, vibration, appearing and disappearing by itself. We learn on deeper and deeper levels that we don't have to fix, manipulate, control, because it's uncontrollable. The shifting is into letting things be just as they are. Sounds, physical sensations, anywhere coming and going in our body, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. breaths, thoughts, emotion, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Just like with the sound, all putting on quite the show. No need to get anything or get rid of anything. Manipulate, control, but oh, to be interested in life, revealing itself moment by moment.
Thank you, Michelle. Mm. So we have some time this afternoon, this evening to take any questions that people might have about your practice, instructions, anything that we might be able to support you with. Uh, right now, be happy to try to help. And so the best way to let us know that you have a question is at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little button that says react. If you click on that, there's raise hand as an option. And then we'll see you have a question. Or if that doesn't work, you can just type into the little chat there, just say that you have a question, we'll call on you. You can ask it, or you can wave your arms around and we'll tend to see that as well. So, Tim,
Um,
hi.
Hi. This is coming with a real, it's funny, I'm feeling some emotion too, but this is coming with a real rush for me. And I seem to be letting go on a very deep level. And when I say letting go, I'm talking more almost internally of needing to carry certain images, certain people, certain activities inside of myself. This is what keeps me safe. This is what my world is. I mean, a very small example would be if I say, call a friend and they don't call me back, and I call them a couple more times, don't hear, don't hear, don't hear. It starts up a whole process inside myself where I say, gee, are they angry at me? Oh my, I got to check this out. And I would check it out. I would check it out, not saying, are you angry at me? But I would call them again. Hey, haven't talked. Are we, that anxiety, I suppose, about being left or abandoned, which of course I had when I was young. Uh, and just sitting here right now, I was thinking, is it safe? In other words, if I let go, am I going to be safe? And there's part of me that says, hell no. I'm doubling down on all this. I'm grasping twice as hard. What do you think? I'm stupid. So, this is the process that's going on for me. Am I okay in releasing and in, let's say, not meeting expectations that other people might have of me? Because my assumption is they're going to hate me and never speak to me again. That's that. I mean, again, there's a lot of conditioning with this, but this is happening on a very deep internal level. A lot of us is, I'm able to verbalize it, but most of us is pre-verbal and it is just happening. Can I breathe out? Can I safely breathe out? Is that possible? And part of me would say no. There's your answer, no. Um, so I get this is what's going on, and I don't know if this is a question or whatever, but it's just so strong for me right now. Um, is it okay to release? Is it okay to release people? Is it okay to release activities? What happens? That kind of thing. That's it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and Tim, just to be clear, because you did write me something about it too. And you're saying also that like that something is shifting, that you there are more moments where you are feeling like you can release, right?
Oh, I feel. I mean, in the
Yeah, like
biggest of
in a more
pictures, I feel
natural
good.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Or that you're sort of or that there are moments where you're feeling secure in like things kind of letting go, and that feels unfamiliar. Is that kind of partly how you would
Well,
say it?
yeah, it does. The level on which I'm doing it feels
Hmm.
unfamiliar. I remember many years ago, Michelle walking into the meditation hall at IMS and doing something from Dylan. Michelle walked in saying, "I want to let go and I can't let go. I want to let go and I can't let go." And
Uh,
that's that's kind of where I am. I
I
want to let
remember
go and I can't let
that.
go. Or if I let go, will you guys still speak to me? Will you ever speak to me again, or will you say, "Okay, be gone"?
You're describing vulnerability. Like you're describing when you let go of that stuff, which human beings, we develop very strange defense
Yeah,
patterns, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they're very strange because they don't feel good, but they protect us from this. What everyone's doing that is can be so painful a defense system, in this case, intense self-hatred, right?
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Intense self-hatred, but also rejection from the
Yeah.
outer world. It's
Right. Well,
not
it's the
okay to,
if you didn't hate yourself, you wouldn't assume they were hating you,
well,
right?
you got me there.
Right. No, I know this one. Sorry, it takes one to know one. Too. So anyway, the human preference for the defense, it's so clear how preferable that is to feeling the vulnerability. That's how scary vulnerability
Yeah,
is.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And so you're describing it perfectly. Like it's just well done. Sadhu,
Well, I
sadhu,
mean, I
sadhu.
think to
Yeah.
put it in a positive way, Michelle, I would say I feel safe enough now that I don't have to call people back, that I don't have to do whatever, and people will still be there for me, which of course was not the case. And my
Right.
conditioning was, you better hang on and you better do what's expected. And that's what's releasing. So this is not a bad thing. It's like there's a level of self-holding inside,
Yeah, this
which
is
is
a
good.
magnificent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really hard. You can see how long it takes to let these patterns, like to just let them be and let them be and let them be and let them be and let them be.
Yeah, and I
Because,
feel good
yeah,
about this, except that it's also bringing up a tremendous amount of terror and
right.
anxiety.
That's like you're right. The vulnerability means that you're not attempting to control, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so this is again why we all don't do it, is because the uncertainty. You can't control other people, right? And so the uncertainty of just
Yeah,
deciding,
yeah.
right, to not try to control it
Well,
is
that's very nice. I mean, I'm really taking in what you said because you're saying, in the end, you're going to have to trust. You're going to have to trust that it's going to be okay,
the
rather
T
than
word, the T word, the
the
T
T
word.
word. Yeah. Uh,
I mean, though, Tim, you don't have to do anything. I mean, I just think it's
Yeah.
like be careful about feeling like it's like that maybe this that there has to be an ultimate departure or moment of release that you versus like there'll be moments that you trust that sort of separation and you are sort of feel more freed from uh, the anxiety around what the connection means with any relationship and then the
yeah,
need to be needed or the need for all that sort of complexity that's like there's moments where it's um there's moments where the trust is happening and letting go. You're not even doing it on purpose. Like I think part of what you're describing and how you have described your process over time, it's like it's not like you've made a decision to do this. This is the natural unfolding
yeah.
of
Thank
your
you, Jesse. This is
practice.
what's happening. This
Yeah,
is
this is
simply
what's
what's
happening.
happening.
There's moments where you'll trust it and that'll feel liberated, and there's moments where you'll be terrified and you'll
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
grab back and then you'll watch yourself do that and that there's like a or you'll come back to sangha or you'll come back into relationship and it won't be the same though. I mean it might not be always perceptibly different, right? But there this is shifting, this it's very powerful to hear the way it's sort of describing the way you're describing the shift happening. So to be careful about yeah, just like laying on too much more sense of that you need to come to some sort of like ultimate
oh,
conclusion
yeah,
around it.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
yeah, it's this is happening and it's
Well,
beautiful and where, you know, it's so much of the complexity of all relationships.
but you're saying don't think too much. Don't try to.
Well, you'll do what you do. I guess
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. You'll do what you do and it's working. You know? And there's going to be times where you don't necessarily feel like it's forward progress, where you're also going to be, I mean, I think this is part of what you're describing about the terror. It's like when you really do trust at times, there's an openness there to
Yeah.
the truth of things, to we how people think of us are out of control, is out of our direct control, or all of our relationships are subject to so many changes. There's moments where that is going to be okay, and you're like, it's okay. You are okay without that. And then
Well, I
there's
think,
going to be moments where it's like, no, it
uh,
doesn't feel okay, and that's, you'll the heart will want to contract around it, and you might be more sensitive to that because you've also trusted more. And so that's like this sort of part of the difficulty of this process is like you're getting strong enough to also feel maybe sometimes even more the the pain of that with those other patternings, right, that
yeah,
we
thank
have.
you.
And so yeah.
I mean, if I had to summarize this, I would say that my safety always lay in glomming onto some external source of safety, whether it be a person or an activity or a pursuit of some kind. But there always was a sense of going out and attaching myself to something, and that was going to give me safety and meaning. And that need to do that. I mean, you said it. I mean, you said it very well. Is that's falling away, and I mean, this is good. I get that this is a good thing, but it
I,
certainly can also feel pretty crazy and chaotic.
I
Right.
think that, and what I'm just going to amplify what Jesse said, which is glomming is okay.
You would say so, Michelle.
Glomming is okay.
Okay. Uh-huh.
It's part of the equanimity that if it happens, that you don't go, don't do it. I don't need you. I
Yeah.
don't need you anymore, right? Like, but actually, it's already happening, right? Like
Right,
you,
right, right.
and so like just being careful. The more you are okay with glomming, the
You mean to
safer
allow that impulse to exist within inside myself?
the safer your system is.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
I know you're already doing that. You wouldn't be able to do what you're doing, but we're just,
No, no, no. I mean, both.
yeah,
Yeah, you guys are sort of reinforcing. Thank you. This is all very
yeah,
helpful, though, because it's kind of like when I'm in this process, it can feel very chaotic and pre-verbal. And what
right.
you all are doing is helping me to maybe consciously shape it a little bit.
Right. And it's the loving kindness, the compassion for that glomming and for the part of you that all that metta is what's allowing you not to glom for sure.
Right,
You're
right, right.
that's you're safe. You're safe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah.
So
and
we're
just
just
of
yeah,
course
let
there
me
is
just
like
finish.
a
Let me
yeah.
just finish. I just want to say you're safe when you are glomming, when you're understanding the glomming.
In other words, to let it be there. Okay, right now I need to quote unquote glom.
Right. That's
Yeah,
safe to, yeah. When
but
that awareness is
I'm gonna
there.
not
Yeah.
get mad at myself or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because part of what you're also describing is the process of by which we also become safe with this notion of non-self, right? That one way of kind of maybe translating what you're saying into some part of the also the kind of classical Buddhist context or the Theravadan context is this is is we so much of how we identify as ourselves is by what we glom onto, right?
Right,
And
right,
who
right,
we
right,
are,
right.
and that's our sense of security. And so that part of what you're also letting go of in those moments is of who you are,
That
quote unquote,
identification. Yeah,
right? Of
yeah,
who you feel like
yeah,
who we think we are, and that is liberating, but it's also scary, right? So
yeah.
that there's times where we want to find that security again in something more familiar and something more that that we can conjure a sense of stability around for times. And we have to understand that there's a functionality to that's like it's not pathological to need some sort of solidity at times of the self,
An
and that
outer identification. Yeah,
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 exactly. It's
yeah,
like, but
yeah,
and that as the system needs it less and less, it will just need it less and less. And then it will go back. And this is not just a one-way process. This is like a kind of back and forth,
yeah, yeah,
opening and closing um dynamic. Yeah, so it's
yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
This is great.
We can call it glomming and non-glomming.
Okay. Well, I get scared
I,
when I'm in a non-glomming state.
Right.
I recognize this is good. I'm
Who is
not
this
glomming
person?
right
Right.
now.
I love
Anyway,
it.
thank you both. I've got it, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Kate.
Yeah. I think seems a little connected to Tim, but like the uncontrollability of things and carrying ownership of my action. Uh, and with that, I've been using phrase of like, oh, may I take myself happily while living on this earth, and finding I'm never find this sense of responsibility of that, like being able to take care of myself. I feel overwhelmed by like, oh, like I don't know how to do that, um, or rather like, oh, I feel like I know how to carry the ownership of self-hatred rather than um, carrying the ownership of caring for myself. And I think over the years I kind of do understand in the sense of like, oh, uncontrollable. And there's like sense like, oh, there is actually things happening on its accord, and I do have ownership. And um I just can't I used to just like, oh, relate to, oh, this like wish of like, oh, I wish I could take care of myself well. Um I'm finding myself um very hesitant to um wish that, because that that seems like too much of a responsibility for me, or like giving myself a grace, so like rain check seems so much responsibility if I do that, or um yeah, I think I'm using more phrases now, and that's coming up to me a little more.
I could start, Jesse. I don't know. I mean, this is like a little, it's the delicacy of paradox. Like it's a paradoxical situation where we take responsibility for what is uncontrollable. You know what I mean? I think that that's one layer that's interesting, that it's always going to seem paradoxical, and that you can't think yourself out of that. Like it's not, but I don't, I would like to go somewhere else with it, but I just wanted to mention that. But that the beauty of saying a phrase is that it's going to bring up everything. So when I first tried to do a meta phrase, like may I be safe and protected, ha ha ha, from inner and outer harm. I remember this part of me just went, yeah, right. Like this sarcasm just came blaring in. That was good. That was meaning the metta was actually working. So that phrase is very evocative for some of us, and that may I take care of myself happily, because, and then this is what I'm going to ask you: is it because you don't have the skill set? Is there a part of you that doesn't have the skill set to do it, or that you just don't want to?
I actually think that I don't want to. Like if I do take care of myself, like wow, that seems that seems to come with like tons of responsibility actually, then um I could handle in a
Like
way.
what does that look like?
Like I cannot blame anybody. Like I'm taking care of myself and there's like it carries a full responsibility. And that seems very scary to me.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. It's so pleasant to blame, right? Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
so it's so pleasant to be able to blame, right? So, it's so hard. You're right on that level.
In that sense, I'm blaming myself like otherwise, and that seems such a homey place,
Well, that's very
unfortunately.
unpleasant, right? But at any rate, are you afraid of blaming a period? Are you afraid of it?
I'm afraid of putting anger outwardly.
So you are afraid of blaming other people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'd rather blame myself, which is
Safer,
not, yeah, feels
safer.
safer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is untangling something very deep, perhaps, like in a kind of a evolutionary stages within your growth, like that. You might have missed the stage where it was okay to blame everybody. You know
100%,
what,
yeah.
like it was safe, like you know what I mean? Like there could be a place where you learn actually how to do it. And before I'm not sure. You might be able to skip it.
Hmm.
It's an interesting question. It really would depend on like if you look at like how it feels in terms of how old you are. If it feels like a young kind of defense mechanism, you might have to learn how to put it out rather
Hmm.
than in. But then, like eventually, it's like the relief, there's a great relief in taking that responsibility because it actually, I mean, it ties into forgiveness. It ties into that we all make mistakes. You know, it's so, the human being is here to learn. And if you're learning, you're going to be making mistakes. And that kind of inevitability of having to um, face how easy it is to make a mistake.
Right. And it takes, I can't forgive, yeah, that I think process of forgiveness takes more than myself. And that, yeah, the condition or environment I've been in has not been very supportive of that. So I think, yeah, forgiveness is a place that's very difficult. I mean, not that I can't forgive or like, yeah, it's just a foreign uh concept or foreign place. Um, Relationally, I can actually think of in the past. That's just a lot of tangling happening. Yeah.
Hmm. Jesse, I could go on, but I think you probably could add a different angle or not. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I'll offer something, I think one is just maybe sort of technical and it may not be helpful, but the difference in translation of that phrase from that, like what I think many of us learned, may I take care of myself happily while living on this earth or something along those lines, to the newer one that we've been using of may I feel the goodness of taking care of myself. It's like a subtle change, but there's something that I do feel like addresses a little bit that gap that you're describing, right? Of like of getting how good it would feel to actually take care of ourselves happily is different than that sense of mandate of like may I take care of what can feel like a mandate, right? Of like may I take care of myself happily. It's like that sense of longing for the goodness of what that would feel like to feel a healthy sense of responsibility for caring for ourselves. Um, it's just it is important with the meta phrases. It's like may all beings be safe. You're not really thinking that you are going to make all beings safe through that phrase. It's that sense of reminding, like that invitation of like what would it be like to care for all beings that much, right? That and that we have to kind of it's a trick. It's like it's a little trick of the mind of like how do you try to remind ourselves like oh we're included in that we ourselves like imagining what it would be like to care for ourselves that much. So there's something I think that can be healthy for all of us in terms of like that, even a subtle change um in how which translation we're using of that phrase, um of that might be helpful, right? Of like, okay, we're imagining what it would be like to feel the goodness of that kind of caring for ourselves. Um, So that's one thing. The second is that just a reminder exactly what Michelle said of just that this is part of why it's a purification process is that we hit a wall with them no matter what. And that is it's designed that way, right? To like find the limits of where we might feel that sense of caring for anybody, and that's why there's especially since the time after the Buddha, it's like so much method around these practices of like going being by being and category by category and layer by layer and realm by realm of like of getting that like that you can just be plugging away at chipping away at cultivating this in all of these different layers, and that it's a long process, and that just because we encounter resistance, not only does that mean it's not worth it, but that it's like okay, that's important. And at the same time, as it's like we're not, you don't want, when we encounter the stiffest resistance, the most difficult places, we don't want to be drowning in it. And so that kind of wise discernment of like, where do you actually choose something else because it's easier, right? Being like, okay, we long for this caring for ourselves, and we get that it's like our deepest kind of trap door. And so that it's like, well, if we do it for something else, um, outside of ourselves or what appears to be quote unquote external, and we can feel it, is there a way that builds the same kind of strength over time? And I think just last, there's something I ever since I kind of started on this path, on this way, it has brought like a very rich, sometimes paradoxical or confusing curiosity and something deeper than curiosity around like this time of year, in particular in Christmas, as this holiday in the Christmas carols and the the not just carols but all of the kind of religious music and Christian kind of religious scripture that is so predominant, in like the Messiah or all of these things, right? Where this notion that like a savior is born, right? Where it is not our responsibility, right? Like that sense of like why that is so compelling. This idea of being saved, like actually our own happiness is not our responsibility. Like someone is gonna save us, and that child has been born, and that is just like hallelujah, right? Like yes, and that sense of getting that, right? Like I think that I have just understood that longing so much better because of the heavy weight that the responsibility of our own happiness is borne by us in this tradition. It's like there is no savior. Like there are many beings who may be very helpful and who are caring and loving, and that they play an important part in the role of supporting our growth and life and practice. But that the burden of and the pressure and the weight and the soberness of the responsibility that you're pointing to is like it is so unique in this world, and it is so almost unbearable, right? At times, that you can see why there's something so satisfying in this other notion, right? Of like, oh, like this, the relief and the joy and the wonderfulness of that, and how powerful a longing that might be in ourselves, and that to not feel like that we need to banish that longing from ourselves, perhaps at times, because we know that it's ultimately not true, right? Quote unquote. Um, because this is part of the human experience. It is part of the life of the heart and of our shared collective vanity, and that that to understand that we may have that part of ourselves too, or that sense of the weight of the responsibility we carry for caring about ourselves and loving ourselves, and that is can feel like such a tall mountain, that there is a place at times also for remembering that even within the many forms of Buddhism that exist, this is recognized, right? There are places where it is where the value of other beings caring for us, right? Human beings that we know uh, uh, care about us, or animal beings or spirit beings, right? At different layers of existence. There's not a denial of their existence, nor of their power, or of their like the potential for them to have like very real influence on our spiritual lives and development. And so I don't want to get too formulaic about it. And it's like, it's a very kind of like personal and ongoing exploration, I think, for any of us. But I do think there's a sense of like, well, where like there's another speaking of Bob Dylan, I've been listening to this like the record, the
Uh-oh.
Slow Train Coming, right? That he came out
Uh-oh,
with.
here we
Like,
go.
I know it's
Uh-oh.
Tim,
Uh-oh,
you
you're
brought up the
giving.
Bob Dylan thing. It's your fault. That like, when he was like super Christian for a while, right? And there's this line of like, I just can't make it by myself. I'm a little too blind to see. And he sings it with such this like agony, and there's something of like, it's real. Like you can't deny that sense sometimes of self-doubt and of needing help and of needing support, and whether it's Sangha or teachers or Kuan Yin or or whatever devas are in like the forest next to where you live, um, or the Virgin Mary, right? Or Jesus or whoever, that to get that there's still a very important role for that um, and in most places where Buddhism has thrived over the millennia, whatever the plural is, millennia, like that it often has survived most in places where there is already an existing kind of animist understanding and connection
Mm.
with the spirit world. And that the sort of vacuousness of like so much Western kind of like uh, spiritual connection and kind of visceral daily experience with that is an interesting place of like where does that what happens here in this time in this context that we find ourselves in without that. And so, or what are the dangers of that not being something that's sort of like holding the Dharma actually. um, so I know it's sort of a long rant about it, but I do feel like there are times where that burden of the responsibility is overwhelming, and that there are ways around that, or ways to still support ourselves in it, where it doesn't always feel like it has to come from us. Even if we recognize that ultimately it does, we are not at the ultimate moment always, right? That we're actually at moments of in process, and that there are many things that can support us outside of like just that pure sense of like, we are owners of our actions.
Mhm.
I have one. Am I on? Yeah. Um, each question is often very rich. And I think that just from taking from a timeless point of view, responsibility isn't heavy. But from a place of time, like a lifetime, it's extremely heavy. Or like even if we take a day. So I just wanted to add that in, that the burden of it is an identification with time. So if we all think of like, what do we have to do today to take care of ourselves? Like it's a lot. And if you don't break it down into moments, it's too heavy, and that's identification. So like just mentioning but I think the underlying perfectionism is really the issue, right? But the perfectionism of it. But I also wanted to say, and just you have all heard me say this, but I think we need all the help we can get, like in terms of spirits or animal beings or like Muhammad or like I just think the prophets were here, like we call them in, and it's like they're all part of ourself, right? So baby Jesus is a part of ourself, and Kuan Yin's a part of ourself, and it's like and et cetera, et cetera. Like it's like all of this, um, even a connection with a cloud or butterfly. It's like all meant to be understood as an internal um, friendship. It's all about friendship and having enough of that to make life worth living. It's really important. It's really important to understand it from that place of, yeah, we need that friendship. So we need to learn how to, as Jesse said, we learn how to care about ourselves through often the care from others. It's very important to understand how all that is important. Mm, mm,
Okay.
yeah. Mm. Call them all in. The more the merrier. Mm.
Thanks, Kate. Mm. Jackie?
Hello. Um, Seems to be uncontrollability theme. My question has I'm not even sure if it's a question, but anyway, so I was doing a meditation a couple of days ago, one of Michelle's meditations, and there was a thing at the beginning where it said, maybe try and set an intention. The instruction was to try and set an intention of some kind, like be kind, intention for kindness or something like that. And then it was like, but this intention might disappear and then it might pop back at the end of the sitting, or it might pop back in a month's time. And I suddenly realized that I have always thought of intentions as being something more solid than your average thought, which floats through your mind and disappears again and is completely uncontrollable. So this sent me off down the rabbit hole a little bit, because I'm like, oh God, does that mean intentions are uncontrollable? If an intention is a thought, like other thoughts, then an intention, it can come and go, and you can't control when it comes and goes. And so I got into a little bit of a bog with that. Because I don't know, I'm sure it's just my mind had just gone, intentions are different from thoughts. Intentions are somehow more solid, or somehow more real, or somehow more meaningful than just the average thought that trots in and out of your brain. And then of course I got into the tangle, because intentions are so um tied up with karma, not past karma, but like present karma, like the karma we're making right now. Like, so and that means I can't control that. And that means I can't control karma, which I can't. I know I can't. But can you see where I'm getting into a bit of a jam with these different types of, I don't know whether they're namas or rupas or whatever, but whatever they are. because I was quite good with like uncontrollability of thoughts and uncontrollability of emotions and being with them and sitting with them and knowing that they come and go, and that part of our kind of job or role is to recognize that and to try and understand it a little bit and try and get to a place where we have more space and where wisdom might arrive and all that. But then when the when I realized that intention potentially is just a thought, I'm like, okay, so what do I do with this whole intention thing now?
Mm.
So that's kind of, and I don't know if that's a question, but I think I've got some things tangled up a bit, kind of.
I love it in the jam of the bog of the rabbit hole.
Yes, I'm in
Yes.
the jam of the bog of the rabbit hole. Spend quite a bit of time there, but I'm up there sometimes too. So, don't worry about it too much, but
Yeah. No, Jackie, it's excellent. It's like very, I mean, it feels like exactly that perfect kind of the question, the when we actually start to see something differently, you sometimes like insight can make us feel more uncertain, and that feels disorienting, but that actually it's a sign of really seeing something more clearly, right? That you had that this sense of like you had an assumption of okay, this was in this box, and this was in this, and then like you understand it, and that's how these more or less, and then suddenly it gets kind of some of that certainty of the form and the structure and the boundaries of one thing or another dissipate or are shaken, and it is shaking, so that's great. Um, I'm sure Michelle and I will both they have a little to say. I mean, classically, the volitional moment, like the volitional moment of any action, a mental action, a verbal action, a physical gesture, that yes, there is this quality of chetana of volitional, intentional um, impulse that is different and distinguishable from the thing itself. So it's distinguishable from the thought. It's distinguishable from the physical gesture. It's distinguishable from the words that come out of your mouth. It's like that sort of this volitional impulse behind it. And that every single physical, mental, uh, uh, verbal like gesture has a moment of volition impelling it, right? Pushing it forward, motivating it. Um, and so that to get to feel like they are distinguishable, they are different. So the volition, the intention is not the same as the thought itself, right? That a thought is actually a different thing than an intention in this context. And this question of uncontrollability is like it gets at yes, some of the sort of similar material. It's like we have maybe the word control isn't all helpful. It's like we have responsibility, right, for the generating the volitional impulse, energy, flavor, right, that is pushing any action forward, right? Um, and that is something we are doing. So there is a responsibility for that, right? And that doesn't mean you can control what happens with that, right? So that, there's the volitional impulse, the intention behind any action doesn't mean that you can control it. That things then, you once it's out of your hand, that you have no longer have the ability, right? But within the flowing of that all, there's a million moments before you actually let go, right? Or before you actually say that thing or type that thing that you maybe shouldn't have, or right. So there's a sense of like it's happening so quickly, but there are so many moments that we can observe and catch up um and intervene at times with something that might be unskillful or might be unwholesome, and going into this question of karma or kama, right? Of like, what is what is the flavor of what we're generating? Where's the responsibility for that lie? But that's different than kind of saying, there is also this, and there's more layers to like, I don't necessarily mean to say that like, especially when you're very quiet and meditating, sometimes there's just like this flood of mental fabrication that is arising and passing from past formations, past volitional moments, right? So it's not that it's all happening necessarily in this particular moment, right? That the aches and physical sensation of past volition, past actions and past do have responsibility for is the that's why because it's chetana and like any of these things is very fleeting. It's a sense of when you're doing when you're doing loving kindness practice that it's not just one moment. It requires a persistent continuity of moments. And then I think just to say, and maybe Michelle can say more, there are ways of practicing where there's that level of intensity, we'll say around metta, loving kindness practice, where it's just like you are just like you're just trying to hit that button, like metta, 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 and you get that it only the impact does only last one moment. You have the moment to care, you care, there's caring that happens, and then there's a new moment. You have to care again. There's like this process of like having to keep caring. It isn't just like, oh, I set the intention and it just unfolds. Part of what Michelle describes is there is this mysteriousness to it, and that there is sometimes something very valuable in just setting the basic intention of a mind oriented towards tenderness, but that tightness around needing to kind of be like tick, 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 actually can keep us from feeling the tenderness. And so a sort of gentleness with that sort of like, okay, I'm setting the basic intention to incline towards care, that a there is a power to that is mysterious and that can unfold over time in ways, and that there is some piece of trusting that sense of caring may kind of come and go, that it doesn't always need us kind of jackhammering it, is also an important orientation towards the practice at times. Yeah, Michelle, do you want to? Yeah.
I know a lot of this can take, it's a lot to take in, that that phrase, like, make the intention, see what happens, like, see what happens. That I'm just piggybacking on what Jesse just said, which is um, there's a purification of motivation right in this process, because if we feel like we can control with the intention, then that's just controlling. And that's untangling that motivation, so it could be that we make an intention to be kind at the beginning of a sitting, and then 5 hours later, there's some kindness that appears. And that's something to really trust, that just because it took 5 hours doesn't, so what? That's the power of it. That's the meaning of it, is that you set the intention and that then you let go of control of the result of it. And that's all part of this process of, if greed if greed is connected to that intention, then you're going to want it to happen the next moment. And that's what I think part of the rabbit hole is that understanding that just because we make the intention, it's not a command. It's like none of the 7 factors of awakening are commands. It's like mindfulness isn't a command. It's obviously there's a moment of mindfulness, and then that does not guarantee that the next moment is a moment of mindfulness. And that's what you're dealing with that impermanence, yeah. But it's also purifying, because otherwise we would think that there should be greed, like we should get what we want with it. And that's like this untangles the greed, hatred, and delusion connected with the intention or the mindfulness. It's like just because we were mindful and then like the next 50 hours we weren't mindful. And then there's another moment of mindfulness. Those moments of mindfulness have great power. And actually, if there's a moment of mindfulness, that sets the conditions for some moment of mindfulness to come again. And that's what you can all see if you've practiced a long time. You can see that that's how it works. The more you're mindful, the more you're going to be mindful. But that does not mean you can control the next moment if it's mindful, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very, um, to me, that's very inspiring once I understood that it was greed, hatred, and delusion have nothing to do with it. But the more you do it, the more you have the intention to be kind, the more kind you will be.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
untangling?
I mean, I sort of, as soon as I thought, oh, my mind has made me want it to be controllable. I was like, well, I kind of knew that it wasn't anyway. But you know what I mean?
Right,
Like, do you know
right.
what I
But
mean? It was,
it's a
you know,
good, really good question because there's a parami called resolution, a determination. It's one of the 10 paramis that's much more like what you were thinking it could be, which is that it has a lot more meaning and a lot more punch.
Mhm, mhm. No, I understand the stuff about orientation, and I kind of did at the time, but there was another layer on top where my mind was going, oh, intention's different. Intention, you can,
Yeah.
it's more control. And I didn't even know I was thinking that. So that's why it was very useful because it made me
No, it's very
realize
good.
that I didn't
Yeah.
even know that I'd been thinking about intention in this way. So yes, it's just like the idea of orientating yourself towards it is much more um pragmatic and doable. So
Realistic.
yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Mm. Thanks, Jackie. Nicole.
Hello.
Hello.
Um, I like that theme of uncontrollability. Mine fits. Uh, I have a question about itching. And then when I was just thinking about it, I guess also counting. So just these compulsive activities of the mind. And I remember I read a quote once from Mahasi Sayadaw, I think, um, about how you should know itching, which I could obviously do during formal practice and have tried, but when itching comes up just like normally, um, like at bedtime, for instance, there's like no space at all around it. Um, so that's part of it. And then also the counting, there's not a lot of space around it, like if I'm tired. And these are new things for me, like in the last like year or so. There are definitely people in my life who have had these things. So I think that's part of the karma that's coming up. But yeah, is that enough? Is that enough? Probably for right now. Um,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, in the count thing, is it sort of just kind of like a little bit like in the background, and does it it's to certain numbers, or does it just kind of keep going up, or does it go?
yeah, it's like certain numbers are preferred.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's definitely but it's not super. I'm not like it's not super rigid, and it's not. Yeah, it's not like I'm not okay if it's not. It's
Hmm.
just it just comes up. It comes up, and I've never experienced it before. So, and I kind of relate it to the itching. I was just going to ask about itching, but in the
Hmm.
sense that it's like not something that feels like there's a lot of space around it, and also judging yourself for it, obviously, which adds to it. And then, um, yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
No,
I,
I mean,
I
I
just
think.
wanna,
Oh,
I just wanna ask, you already asked Jesse, but I think I need to understand, like,
yeah,
is it like you start going one, two, I'm really
yeah.
naive with this, so I just wanna, is it like you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that?
No, it's more like if there's like I have a lot of visual. Like I noticed, I don't remember. an instruction that maybe Jesse gave like during a retreat, or I'm trying to remember, but about like walking meditation, and I just realized through that I don't accept experience particularly like visually, like things I want things to look a certain way. And uh so it's more like I want like five things in one place, not four, something like that. um or yeah, yeah. Uh
Is it like redecorating?
yeah. Yeah, I guess it's I try to think of it as like a kindness in a way, because again, these are sort of me becoming identified with um it feels like I'm becoming identified, whereas like in the past it would have been totally like shut down, like that wouldn't even have come up.
Mhm.
But I don't know,
And
maybe
yeah, no, and to me it sounds a little distinct. Well, we can go
yeah.
back and forth a little. I mean, I think, you know, we do know, we start to notice, or then they can change over our lives as they're sort of like, is it new or is it something that you've sort of just not noticed before? It doesn't really matter. It's like, I think in some ways you start to see like the many ways that we rehearse whatever as a way of creating a kind of sense of stability and kind of organization and solidity and a sense of control and a sense of sort of solidity, you know. And so, there are many ways that we can do that in terms of like the tendency to want things to be in a certain order, whether that's like a numerical order, whether that's like a kind of control or emotional order or whatever. I mean, I think that it's like that we all have, and the practice starts to have us see the sense that we're just kind of we do rehearse these things, and we rehearse ourselves, right, more than anything else. The sense of our own internal voice, our own story about ourselves, our preferences. Um, and that and we know all kinds of patterns, right, with ourselves and our lives and our kind of relationships. So I think to me there's a sense of it feeling very similar, just like along these lines of like, oh, we start to see the way in which the mind has a preference for certain things, and for certain things that it will find more comfortable, more safe, providing more of a sense of stability than other things. And there's always just that kind of the dance of the practice, which is where do we not judge that? Where do we not, um, uh, kind of give ourselves what might be a sort of like kind of habitual sort of hard time around it, but also see that it is not of, it's not like, yeah, the sign of our like places of deepest freedom either, right? That of course there's a sense of kind of preference or kind of where we're where the sense of kind of orderliness around things internally or externally um, are providing that. And understandable that of course that there is something to like respect about them when it feels, that it's not destructive or you're doing something safe and it's not harming you or someone else, right? It's like that there are places to like allow for those and to honor them and be interested in them and kind of maybe like even a little bit of what I think Michelle's inclining towards is like kind of playfulness with them, and a sense of curiosity about like, oh yeah, we're knowing that we ultimately don't have control over a lot of things. We're not always going to be able to have things be kind of pleasing to whatever sense we're sort of sense door we are most sensitive to. And that ultimately we are trying to develop the capacity to feel a sense of safety, of okayness, connectedness to our ability to care and our ability to have peace, no matter what is happening internally or externally. But that the process of getting there isn't just by rejecting these tendencies, it is by kind of trying to understand them and be careful with them sometimes have boundaries with them, but at the same time, not feel like we're totally beholden to them in the long run either. But that process isn't one just of kind of discipline. It's one of coming into like a kind, curious relationship with whatever patterns we start to find in ourselves. Michelle, do you have any?
I have a hilarious story that probably doesn't connect at all to what you're saying, but I can't help but tell it because many years ago at the monastery in Burma, like way up, remote monastery way up in northern Burma. And I'm trying not to mention names, but a very famous teacher, Western teacher, brought a whole busload of very famous people up there. And they came into the monastery and it was like, they had no like context that we'd been sitting quietly for 2 months. I mean, 2 weeks, like, and it's like a monastery in Burma. Like, there's rules, right? Like, you bow when the teacher talks, or like, it was just like, unbelievably dissonant, like what happened when they came in. And they came into the, they came into the dining room, and everybody's eating silently. And it kind of turned into a bit chaotic. So I found out what they were doing, and they just wanted to have like a question answer period. And somehow we switched it all. Like, people finished eating quickly and tried to make it into a quiet thing. And somebody asked, somebody asked that they had read about this itch thing. That's why I'm bringing it up, Nicole, because they had read about. And if you notice an itch, if you're sitting, not to have that knee-jerk reaction to scratch it, but to be interested in it, and notice the sensation. So somebody had asked this question of me. One of the people coming in had heard of it, and it was a setup. I could even feel it. I started answering it, and this person just had so much aversion. She just yelled out like, if I have an itch, I'm just gonna scratch it, Michelle. Like, like, but it was so glaring. The dissonance was, and I'm saying this in relationship to what Jesse just said. The dissonance is in having space around having no space, right? Or having space, like like you described this place that you're interested in. And that's what I feel is important. It's like, and that's why I told the story, because this dissonance was that there was no space for anything but a knee-jerk reaction. And there was no understanding that what we're encouraging more than anything is to be interested as much as possible at first without embellishment, right? Without that extra overlay of a past conditioning thought process about something, right? So that instead of going, uh, mosquito lands, whack, right? Itch, scratch, like that, like it's like Pavlov's dog, right? Like it's just like doing the automatic knee-jerk response, which is instead of pausing, right, and giving it space, and then you scratch it if you don't have space, right? It's not like you murdered somebody because you scratched, right? It's not like there's something wrong, inevitably ethical about that. It's more just you learn how to explore knee-jerk reactions and having freedom. It's about freedom. So you're describing something that I think is really important because it's making space um, with the tendency of your mind. That's what it looks like. I mean, that's like as pure as I could say it. It's like a pure inclination. And instead of, like you say, instead of clamping down on it, you're making space for that layer of reality.
Yeah, it's funny though, this paradox between, because when you first said what that person said, I'm my first reaction is like, yeah, it's really hard not to scratch.
It's really hard not to scratch, right? Yeah.
So the paradox of being curious in it, but just not um, being able to. Yeah, I mean, it kind of relates to a question of responsibility, even though on a very like funny level, because you can't help yourself, Um,
Well,
so
and you even said, Nicole, like that sense of when you're in a more intensive environment of meditation and you have a concentration built up and the mindfulness feels more available, more accessible, and there's, your mind is not maybe as distracted with other responsibilities in life. The sometimes it's like something that might otherwise feel like a very overwhelming kind of fixation can be like okay, or you can feel like you have with the protection of a retreat container, you have an ability to be in relationship with it that's like, oh yeah, more flexible, more fluid. And then when you're in the midst of your daily life and that there isn't that sense of protection, you're worn down, you're tired, and blah blah blah, blah, like then you don't have as much capacity to sort of be as, sensitive and mindful and caring and all of these things with it. So I mean, it's part of that reality, of like, well, when we're less protected, we're less protected, and we're more protected, we're more protected. And so then when you're not in retreat and you're not able to kind of like gather those forces of kind of genuine interest and, breaking out of some of that sort of, habit patterning that we have, then it's like you give yourself a break around the
mm,
expectation that you're gonna, the sense that you're just gonna, oh, just be mindful of it, and you're exhausted and it's like whatever, the end of a long day. It's like that there is some sense of like, yeah, right. You scratch. It's like, this is,
mm,
and the sense of and the way whatever it's like related to the numbers piece too. It's just that sense of like when the system is taxed, it's going to probably lean on these things more, right? And that you don't want to set yourself up to have it feel like a bigger failure versus an understandable like tendency of the mind when we're under more pressure, more stress, more tired, more whatever.
mm,
Um, and you manage your way through it. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, thank you. That's what I needed to hear.
Mm,
It's not, yeah, because it's funny how even with something like that, you're like, I should be able to, yeah, slow down right now. And
boy.
yeah.
Ha ha ha.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's Michelle, if you saw in the chat, there's one other thing that Marina brought up related to some other stuff, and I'm not sure if we want to, is there anything else to address around it, but it just says the word care feels particularly painful, got beneath the tears that felt the child loss, like I could get the care or have gotten care from somewhere else, not myself. I let it pass through me and gave more metta, but just curious about your thoughts on this, wanting external versus internal, as if my own care is not good enough. Um,
Oh, we can both just, um, I think the significant piece there is that my own my own care might not be good enough. Yeah. I mean, that's all of these things, like as Jesse mentioned, and it's a purification process. So when we use the word kindness or care or tenderness, we're trying to find a word that might be the most helpful. And we understand that there's probably going to be a word that is going to be evocative and hard. So we're not saying use the word that is evocative and hard. So if you want to you wouldn't want to bring that word in all the time if it's evocative in that way, but you don't want to totally avoid it. But you do want to start learning It's all learning. So you're learning from that, the tears and what happened. You actually learned, you actually said it, that you learned when you were little that your care wasn't good enough. Yeah. So then you have to start there. You can't start with, I should be able to do that all the time, right? Like I should be able to just change this. And you you wait till you have some strength of the kindness. You do the practice that does penetrate and that doesn't bring it all up. That's you do what's easy first, and then you might later on somewhere bring up the care and see what happens. And you see that if you can do like 2 seconds, that's enough. And you'll have the intention to be able to build on that in a lifetime. That you'll have an intention to want to be able to care about yourself more and more, but you also, it's totally okay as Kate's question definitely hit the jackpot, right? Like it's like getting that we also need to receive care from other beings, other humans, that's also important too. Does that, I hope that addresses it somewhat. Jesse, do you want to add anything into that? Because it's an important question.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's so fundamental, and it is, all these questions are.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit of coming from another angle, but I went to a, a I'm just trying to we'll call it the language. I went to a service this morning. My little nephew was in a play at the end of um a different tradition, their kind of regular Sunday service. And so one of the, it was a beautiful service and had its different elements, which were, somewhat familiar to me. And one of the elements was this like 2-minute meditation, maybe that, right? Um, and, it was beautiful. It was lovely. And it just helped me realize, like, clarify something about like what we're doing and how and what we're not doing and how unsatisfying this is probably to like a lot of people, which is like we spend the first 45 minutes sitting. You know what I mean? Like this is about like everyone ultimately being able to do this by themselves and ourselves, right? That it isn't, it's like we honor the Sangha and we want everyone to be here and we value and understand our roles as like what it means for our ability to support. And it's also not designed for us to be needed in the long haul, right? It doesn't mean that we want people to like graduate and never come back, but there is a sense of like the practice is making you strong and it is and a beautiful self internal strength and that it's so hard and that it is there's no time frame, there's no like, oh, you should get through this in the time it would take to get your doctorate or your bachelor's degree or go through school or anything. Like there's no linear approach to the time frame of it. And so there's also this sense of like we're building that strength to be able to do this, to care about ourselves and not and see the ways in which like, wow, maybe we really are so trained and for this lifetime, many lifetimes to feel like we always just need that externally, right? Just to go to this one question of Marina. But it's all of these questions, everything, right? It's like, and how long and slow and careful and how careful a process it is to develop this sense of strength of not needing that. And that doesn't mean that we still don't rejoice in the love from other people. And we don't that we don't at times really realize we do need that, right? And that thank goodness that we can help provide that for other people. All of us can do that for other people, and that we try to see that there are healthy ways also of like receiving that from other people, the care of others, and that it's not just a sense of like our own weakness that we want to be loved and cared for. It's like, yes, of course we do, and there is a strength that builds that is beyond conditions. And so I just think that it kind of also points to some of the paradox that has been at the center of a lot of the questions too, of like, this is a long, mysterious process, that we often will kind of go back and forth, that we'll have points where you feel really strong and a sense of your own capacity to care and not needing it. And then sometimes that will open you up to a vulnerability that's very overwhelming. And we realize it's like why the Sangha is a part of like, these the triple gem, right? It's like actually we need the support of one another. We need the congregation. We need the community, to give us strength and encouragement and guidance and whatever else it might be. So yeah, it's a fundamental question and a fundamental pain and it is the design is that this is what a big part of what we're building is that sense of capacity, to care, and that it ends up not being our care for ourselves or this person's care. It's like the identification with it dissipates, so it's just caring, and it doesn't actually need to be me or mine or yours or anyone's in particular, and that is the deepest, most liberating kind of care, that we can connect with.
I will say thank you for that. I will say that at one point in the process, I did kind of tap into and remember the Sangha and the teachers and connect to the bigger, net and that assuaged me somewhat. And I guess on Zoom too, it's not that visceral. I can, you're not in a room together where you feel that necessarily. So I had to kind of remember that you guys were out there and that helped. So
Yay.
thank you so
Of course, we could talk 2 more hours about that question. So please know that. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, thank you
yeah.
so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Mm,
Well, everyone,
mm,
thank you.
mm.
Yeah.
Good luck through the
Mm,
holiday.
yeah.
There's a lot of holidays this week. A lot of them. Take care.
Yeah. Stay
Mm,
warm in here and here. There. Mm. Take care of yourselves.
yeah. Thank you for your practice.